This is the J. Scott Outdoors podcast on Western big game hunting and fishing, brought to you by GoHunt.com Insider. Research faster, hunt more. Go to GoHunt.com/insider and join today. I'm your host, Jay Scott, and I live and breathe hunting and fishing, spending half the year in the field experiencing God's creation. I hope you'll enjoy hearing about our adventures. Guys, we're going to have a great episode today talking about October Coues deer hunts, and this weekend the Coues deer hunts all across Arizona are kicking off, and I've got a bunch of friends that are going to be out on the hunts, and I just want to wish you guys all the best of success. Looks like with all this rain we've had, it's going to be great. The weather's going to be cooler, and normally these October hunts the weather could be 95 degrees, but it looks like you guys are going to have some good weather for these hunts. This is going to be a great episode with Elliot Weigel of Hunt AZ on Instagram, and he's a Coues deer fanatic, and we're going to have a fun time on this episode. Guys, I wanted to remind you that you can follow along with our hunting adventures on Instagram at JScottOutdoors and at darcolburn. And I want to thank all of you guys that hashtag some of your posts with hashtag JScottOutdoors. You can also tune into our YouTube channel, which is JScottOutdoors on YouTube, and of course our blog, jscottoutdoors.com. Guys, I want to thank you for all the reviews that you've left on iTunes. That helps our placement. If you haven't done that already, please take time to go and leave some positive comments and a 5-star rating. I also wanted to remind you that you can get a free trial of the Go Hunt Insider, a 24-hour free trial. So go to GoHunt.com and click on the 24-hour free trial, and you'll see what an incredible resource GoHunt.com is. I want to thank GoHunt.com Insider for being the title sponsor of this podcast. And this month of October, they're giving away 2 spots on a Coues deer hunt in Sonora, Mexico with Dark Colburn and myself. A $5,500 value per person plus a $1,000 travel voucher. You can go and get all the details. All you have to do is be an Insider member to be in the drawing, and you have to be in by, I believe, the end of October. And they're going to draw on November 1st, but all the details are on their website at gohunt.com. Guys, also, you're going to hear me in this episode give Elliot Weigel a hard time about being a U of A Wildcat. For those of you that know me, you already know the story, but I started going to ASU football games when I was in kindergarten with my grandfather, and I'm a dyed-in-the-wool ASU football fan, and so that rivalry is alive and well. I will say that when U of A is playing against other teams, I do root for them and hope that Arizona, love our state of Arizona. But the big game is coming up on November 21st. As far as I'm concerned, that is the only game that matters all year. I don't care if ASU goes undefeated as long as we beat the U of A. But it's all in good fun and all in good spirits. I had a cousin, Jimmy, that went to U of A, and have had a lot of friends that have gone there. But I sure cheer for the Sun Devils. U of A is 5-2. They're second in the South Division. They face Washington State. It's their homecoming this weekend. ASU is third in the South Division, and they face Oregon this week. So it's going to be some tough games, but the big game's coming up on November 21st, and I want to hear from you guys out there. I appreciate all the emails at jscottoutdoors@gmail.com. I've gotten a lot of great questions and comments, and we're going to do some episodes answering a lot of these questions. But feel free to email me, let me know how your hunts are going, and send me pictures of your successful hunts, and let's get right to this episode here with Elliot Weigel. Welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we have Elliot Weigel from Tucson, Arizona. Elliot informs me that he is a U of A Wildcat fan, so we've already rolled around in the dirt a little bit tonight. But
Elliot, it's good to have you. Elliot is the founder of Hunt AZ. That's Hunt_AZ on Instagram, and has a very popular page. I believe 25 or 30,000 Instagram followers. And if you want to see animals that are shot and harvested and hunting photos from Arizona, go on Hunt_AZ. Elliot's got a great page. Elliot, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Jay. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing just fine. We just got off that Arizona raffle sheep hunt, and I was gone 30 days for the elk hunt, and it's I love this time of year, but it's nice to be home for a few days and get a little bit of a breather before I head back out for scouting and such. And Dar's oldest boy has a strip deer tag that we're excited to go on, and as you probably feel, this is just an exciting time of year with a lot going on.
Oh, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, Jay. The fall of the year, you get that chill in the air a little bit, and it just reminds you, and it smells of deer season and elk season and just the outdoor season.
Absolutely. And Elliot, you're an avid Coues deer hunter like myself, and today I want to talk about Coues deer hunting, specifically early season Coues deer hunting. And I want to talk a little bit about behavior and patterns and some hunt strategy, talk some gear, people management, during the hunt, and then maybe some tips you have for some first-timers or even people that are experienced Coues deer hunters. I believe the 1st October general Coues deer seasons are opening up across the state this Friday. We are recording this episode Tuesday evening, and so there's a bunch of Jay Scott podcast listeners that are going to be out hitting the woods. I know Dar's got his youngest son, Paul. He's just turned 10, and they're going to be doing a backpack hunt with the little guy, with Paul and Parker, both boys, trying to get Paul his first Coues deer. I understand you're going to be hitting the Coues woods this weekend as well.
Yes, that's true, Jay. I have my brother and my dad have tags, and I was fortunate enough this season to be guiding in that unit for the youth hunt, and I think it's a great unit, and I think it's a great year, for deer this year. We were able to get two young ladies. One of the young ladies was their first buck. The other young lady was a little more experienced, and this was her actually fourth Coues deer. These hunts, man, are just no greater thrill for me to see that smile on a young lady or a young man's face on a successful hunt.
Absolutely. And I'm of the opinion that a Coues deer hunt is a great hunt to start the youth out on, because they get to hike, they get to see the trials and tribulations of a hunt. It's not easy, but usually you can find deer, and animal sightings are plentiful, and usually you see javelina, and it just makes for a great experience. Yeah. And I'm a firm believer that if you're a Coues deer hunter, most of the best hunters that I know are avid Coues deer hunters, and most of the best hunters I know grew up Coues deer hunting and have learned how to glass and how to spot and stalk and how to find deer. They are small in stature, and they do have a tendency to hide well. And most good hunters are good glassers, and I think that's from learning and having the Coues deer train us to spend many an hour with a lot of patience looking for those deer. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely, Jay. I think that quality glass is very important, and like you say, patience. It's so funny how many scenarios I've been on where we can hit a hill with glass for several hours, and then you might hike 50 feet down the hill to get another angle on a different part of the area. And you look back and on that hill you just glassed for 2 hours, and there's 5 deer, 5 bucks sitting there feeding in the open, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is amazing how Dar and I like to cross glass, and not to be misunderstood with cross dressing. We like to.
Yeah.
I thought you'd laugh at that. We like to cross glass, and what I mean by that is we like to have two different angles where we are both either looking into each other's country from a different angle, or even if it's just up on the same hill, we typically don't like to sit together. We like to move away where we have different perspective. And like you said, it's amazing how you could sit there on a hill for 3 or 4 hours and not find a particular buck or any deer for that matter. You change your angle by 100 yards and boom, all of a sudden you catch a glint of antler, and there's a Coues buck that's been basically bedded in the shade of a mesquite tree in the wide open, laying in the yellow grass, and he's been laying there, for the last 3 hours. You just didn't see him. Yeah. I want to talk to you about behavior that you witness on early season Coues deer hunts, and talk about what you see. I will start out by saying one of the things that I like about the early season hunt, and particularly the youth hunt that just passed, is that if you're able to go out and do some scouting and find a particular buck, most of the time, if you have 3 or 4 days on that junior's hunt, you can get in there and find that deer. And Coues deer in October don't move a whole lot, and they're also with other bucks. And so I think the early hunts, if you have time to scout, can be extremely productive.
Yes, Jay, that is, I find that 100% true. The bucks, they hang together by age class. For instance, if you glass a group of does, it's almost certain there is not a buck in there. And it kind of makes for an easier way to just look over deer. You don't got to spend a whole lot of time on them when you do glass a group of does. But when you do get into the bucks, yes, I totally agree. They don't move a whole lot. The weather is extremely hot still in some units, not all units. As you know, Coues deer are very, very widespread throughout the state. You got them from the Mexico border all the way up to the Mogollon Rim, and it's just it's what I love about them. That you can hunt them in the ocotillos and the mesquites, and you can hunt them in the high oaks and even in the pine trees. So
absolutely, they're an amazing animal. Elliot, if you had to say your favorite country, and you mentioned that they live all the way from say 2,000 feet or 1,500 feet of elevation all the way up to 8,000 feet, top of Mount Lemmon or even up at the Flagstaff and some of those areas. What is your favorite area? What is your favorite vegetation type to hunt these deer?
Jay, I'd have to say that the mid-desert would be my favorite, only because that's where I grew up, and I grew up hunting that vegetation, and it's I don't know if I would say that I've kind of had a trained eye for that area,
And are you talking like mesquite and ocotillo and a little bit lower, not quite into the oaks, kind of maybe a little fringe oaks,
yes,
but a lot of mesquite and a lot of ocotillo?
Jay, for all those listeners that are familiar with Arizona, the unit I really did grow up in was 35B. It's down south, the Patagonia Mountains. It's a little north east of Nogales, the city of Nogales, and that's always just been kind of a just a family spot that I always hold dearly to my heart, just because the opportunities I've had and of looking at deer and just watching their incredible behavior and just doing what Coues deer do. Um, and I always thought that was really special. Another great unit, I'd have to say, is Unit 33. It's here in it surrounds the Tucson metro area. It's the Catalina Mountains. It's the Rincon Mountains. Just a unbelievably huge unit. Excuse me.
Yeah.
And the buck to doe ratio is just great. It's just a great unit for a great opportunity. So.
One thing about Unit 33 that always surprises me is with as many tags as there are in there, it still produces great deer and great opportunity for that matter. And the diversity of terrain in 33, all the way from the desert floor all the way up to, up in the pines. There's Coues deer all over every inch of that unit, and it's certainly one of Arizona's top producers. What would you say from a behavioral standpoint in a morning, let's say a typical end of October hunt, and what kind of behavior do you witness as far as how much activity and movement are you looking for on a normal October hunt?
That's a very good question, Jay. I'd have to say, I think it's very important you get out there early morning. If you can be out in your glassing spot by, before the sun comes up, even when it's still dark, I think that's very important. And I think those deer, I have found anyways, they feed till about 10:30, 11 or so, and then they go to their beds. There is that other hunt you can, if you have quality optics, and you know where to look for, you can glass them. They change beds, I think, at least once or twice in the middle of the day. They get up, they stretch. They're not much different than us, They got to stretch and just kind of get the blood flowing, and that's a really good hunt too. Last youth season, we got a great deer in that scenario. We glassed him in his bed. We waited 2 hours. He stood up and stretched, and Jesse put a great shot on him at 470 yards. So it's just one of those things where my philosophy is patience and persistence. The double P's there. I think that's very important. Don't get discouraged in the middle of the day. Just stay at it, and it's very productive when you do so.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Elliot, we're going to take a quick break here to hear from our sponsors, and we'll get right back here.
Guys, there's some frequently asked questions of Go Hunt Insider, and one of them is, how is your unit information any different than the print magazines which offer something similar? The answer is, the Insider provides analysis and tools for every unit, every species, every hunt in each state that GoHunt.com covers. We don't rate top 10 units. Our coverage is much more comprehensive than what currently exists. Plus, being 100% online, GoHunt.com has the ability to make updates to our information much faster. The print magazines only update their information once a year. Another question is, what states do you currently cover, and what is your plan to add more? GoHunt.com Insider currently offers Arizona, Colorado, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana. Oregon is next, and they'll be live in 2015 or early 2016. After that, they'll turn their focus to Washington since we offer analysis and tools for every state, season, and species. When GoHunt.com adds a state, it requires a ton of time and resources from the team. GoHunt.com is constantly working on new states, and that won't change. And people also ask, how do your giveaways work? GoHunt.com insider giveaways are the most aggressive in the industry at no additional charge. All insiders are automatically entered into our monthly giveaways. GoHunt.com insider performs a random drawing at the end of each month and announces the winners. Guys, if you haven't signed up for GoHunt.com, click on the blue Join Now button and you will receive a $50 Coues gift card if you use the J Scott promo code. Also, this month of October, they're giving away 2 spots on a rut Coues deer hunt with Dar Colburn and I in Sonora, Mexico. Lorenzo Sartini of GoHunt.com, the president, is going to be going on the hunt, and he's taking 2 insider members with him. It's got a retail value of $6,500 per person. That's $5,500 for the hunt and a $1,000 travel voucher. We'll be leaving on January 7th, and we'll be starting our hunt on the morning of the 8th, and we will hunt for 7 full days. The deer should be rutting, and we should have a great time down there chasing Coues deer. All you have to do is be an insider member to win. So use the J Scott promo code and also get the $50 Coues gift card, and love to hunt with you down in Sonora, Mexico.
Okay, Elliot, you mentioned that on the youth hunt, you watched the deer in its bed and then you waited for it to get up in the shade change. We do that a lot. Dar and I do that a lot. And one thing that people don't understand is that between 10 and 2 sometimes can be the most effective glassing period of the entire day. And I would put it right up there with even at first light. I still think, the first 2 hours of light is the most critical. But I would say if I had to choose, I would rather glass between 10 and 2 than the last 3 hours of light. And I would put the first 2 hours in the morning between 10 and 2, number 2, or is second, and then the third would be, the last 2 hours of light.
Sure.
One thing I always tell people is, especially on hot days, even when you want to go back to camp, some of the best glassing is coming right in the heat of the day, because they typically feed for a couple hours in the morning and then they lay there, and then that shade changes wherever they're laying, and all of a sudden their head gets in the sun and the sun just starts beating on them. Finally, they can't take it anymore, and they actually need, because a lot of times they're bedded behind an ocotillo or bedded behind a mesquite tree, and there doesn't give a lot of shade. And actually the shade moves, and so they actually have to get up and change positions. A lot of times they bed by the same tree, but they just have to move from where they are out of the sun back into the shade. And usually, and I'll let you weigh on this, when they do make their move, rarely do they stand up and just immediately right back down. What I notice is they stand up, they stretch their legs, they feed for 2 or 3, 4 minutes, 5 minutes. They kind of move around just a little bit. They stand there like they're almost stretching, and then they go back down in a bedded position. And it's almost like clockwork. As soon as you start seeing deer do that, in my opinion, you need to be scanning heavily across the hillsides, because I don't know what it is about bucks, but it seems like they all stand up within about 20 to 30 minutes of each other. So if you start catching them, really be looking for, and you could spend, you could see 15 bucks on one hillside that you never even saw.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Jay, I agree with you 100%. Those deer, they're, I have to say, so many of my successful hunts on Coues bucks, the shot time has been during that period that you talk about, when that shade changes, and they stand up and stretch, and they relocate just to stay in the position to stay cool, in the shade or in a mesquite tree or even in a juniper tree. And so yes, I do agree with that, Jay. It's the most magical. It's a very important time of the day for the hunt that you do not want to overlook.
Yeah, and I think it's even more important hunting coues than, say, hunting elk or hunting mule deer or sheep or other animals where, it's just something about them that they absolutely will move around and follow that shade.
Yeah.
As far as bucks, you're talking about if you are on your knob and you're up there before light and say you didn't have a lot of time to do scouting and you're up there opening morning and you're glassing just doe and fawn and doe and fawn and doe and fawn after another, I would recommend that you'd probably need to move either on the other side of the mountain or hike across the canyon because you're kind of in the doe zone or the nursery. What do you think?
Sure, absolutely sure on that. Typically, my experience on this recent youth hunt, we spend an hour in one area when glassing light is available. And if, exactly what you're saying, actually, we've ran into areas where you just see nothing but doe and fawn. What we do is we move down the ridge line. I can't speak for every scenario, but this particular mountain we were hunting was very convenient for that. We could move another quarter mile down the trail, and we could put glass on a different portion of the ridge. And I think you are correct, Jay. Covering country is very important this time of the year. The bucks obviously aren't with the does, and like you say, it's you run into nurseries, just does and fawns everywhere you look. And that was our experience with this youth hunt. We looked at probably 40 does and small bucks, little fork horns, never hanging together, but just as we moved along, we covered a lot of country and looked at a lot of deer. And the law of averages came in where we finally did find a buck worthy of Jesse's tag, So, yeah, I do think that it is very important.
I think you make a great point there talking about ridge lines, and I'll speak a little bit on ridge lines. One of the things that I like about ridge lines is if you're hunting with a buddy, a lot of times a guy can go one way and a gal or a guy can go the other direction on the same ridge line. And within a 20-minute walk, 20 minutes each way, be in completely different country. And if you repeat that process several times throughout the day, you can just cover a whole bunch of country. And I think there's something to be said for sitting in one spot all day or at least for a half a day. But, as you know, the more country that you cover efficiently and effectively, the better chance you have to find a target buck. The other thing I like are cone knobs where you hike up to a peak where you can be there at first light, and I'm totally with you I love walking in with the headlamp, and I love getting all my glassing pad or my seat, my tripod, everything set up, my gun, everything ready to go.
Sure.
And, kind of be settled down, cooling off and letting everything settle down, and then glassing from a cone knob where I can see 360 degrees. And one of the things I like about being able to glass 360 degrees is at any given time, you can just turn 180 degrees and glass either into the sun or into the shade, depending on which direction you're looking. So if you're not seeing any deer out on the open hillsides, all you do is flip around, and all of a sudden you're looking on the thick slopes, and you've just changed your strategy and your tactic. And So I want to encourage you guys out there listening to get there early and cover country. And there's a time when you need to just sit and stick it out, and then there's a time when you know in your heart you need to move. And I think knowing when you need to make a change is important, because I think you can waste a lot of time in an area where there's a lot of does and you're not seeing a lot of bucks, and you can end up wasting a bunch of time on your hunt.
Oh yeah, couldn't agree more, Jay. And that is a fine line. Like you say, it is a fine line. Recognizing that time to change spots, and I always thought that was somewhat of a fun thing about Coues deer hunting. It's the anticipation. It's something about making that decision, and sometimes it doesn't come easily. And yeah, I always thought that was something that's pretty neat, that I love about hunting Coues. So
absolutely. One thing that comes to mind too is, let's say you had a chance to scout before the season, and let's say you saw a nice buck, and just for example, let's say it was a 105-inch type buck, and that was a buck that you really wanted to harvest and you really wanted to kill, and you saw that buck, and let's just say you saw him one time and he was on a hillside and he was just feeding. He wasn't moving. He was pretty stationary. One thing I think that's very important to note is Coues deer especially are very habitual, and they have a very small range in my mind, and especially when it's very wet out and a good moisture year, they don't have to move very far between bedding and feeding and water, because they've got everything they need in a pretty tight circle. If you happen to see a big buck, I think it's very important that you want to go back and you want to look and glass exactly where you saw that buck, and most of the time he is going to be within 100-yard circle, and this is my opinion, of that area, unless he's gotten bumped by other hunters or by a lion or something outside of his normal routine. Coues deer are very habitual and very routine, and let's say it was day 3 of the hunt, you glass up a big buck, you lose him in the brush, and you think, well, he's gone. Well, he's probably not gone. He's probably just bedded and you can't find him. Dar and I always like to say, all you got to do is find a big buck. Once you find him, you can hone in and circle in on his core area, especially in the early season, and get those bucks killed, because they tend not to move a whole lot. Have you had that same experience?
Jay, 100%. It was funny last year. 2 years ago, I had a 36B tag. For the listeners who don't know, 36B is one of the units that it borders the Mexico border, and it's always been notorious. A lot of people like it. A lot of people don't like it, just for the uneasy activity from the border. I was hunting with a couple of buddies of mine, and I glassed an 83-inch. He was a giant 4-3, and he was cool to look at, early in the hunt. And I said, it's a leftover tag, but I still want to look for something bigger. So 2 days went by, and the hunt started getting a little slow. We weren't seeing a whole lot of good bucks, and I went back and I found that same buck, literally 100 yards away from the first time I glassed him, on the second day of the hunt. And so I thought that was very, very textbook, of Coues deer behavior. So yes, I do agree. Those deer, they really don't move a whole lot. If they're not pushed around, they'll be in there. The hardest part is just finding them, because like you say, their behavior makes them very elusive. So
yeah, and so it's usually a warm time of year, so there's not a lot of movement. They get pretty nocturnal, But one of the things I like about early season as well, like I said earlier, is most of the time the bucks are in groups of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bucks in one group, and so keep in mind that if you're glassing, and I like to glass on the northeast slopes, typically like to look in the areas that pretty much have shade, most of the day, and early season that's where I tend to find the most bucks. And when you find let's say a small buck, don't think for a second that buck is by himself, because 9 times out of 10, he is going to at least have another buddy with him, and more than likely have 2 or 3 or 4 other bucks within probably a 30 to 50 yard circle. And so if you glass up a couple bucks, and you see a couple bucks bedded, I would really be looking hard for another buck that might be a better buck. Sometimes small bucks bed together and sometimes big bucks bed together, but a lot of times bucks in general hang out in the same areas, and you can have a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 6-year-old all within 50 yards of each other.
Oh yes, absolutely. That moment I glass that first buck, that's immediately what I do. I go to scan mode and I look around and I look 100 yards in each direction of that deer, and I look for any other deer or antlers or what I can come up with. And so yes, I do agree. That's very important, Jay, because 9 times out of 10, they are never alone this time of the year. The bucks, they hang together like bachelor groups. Sometimes bigger, sometimes smaller, and it's just it's a very, very important tool to do when you do glass that first buck.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about hunt strategy. And one point that I want to make about hunt strategy, like it or not, if you like hunting with your buddies and you like being able to communicate with your buddies, I like having radios and being able to talk to my buddies throughout the day and seeing how they're doing. Some people don't like to hunt with radios. It becomes an issue if you're hunting record book deer, and if it's a deer that's going to make Pope and Young or Boone and Crockett, you want to make sure that you're not using radio communication, because those deer will not be accepted into the record book. But if you're just hunting with your buddies and having a good time, one hunt strategy that I really think is very effective. Elliot, I'm getting a little feedback there. I don't know if something's kind of rattling or I hear something there.
I'm not too sure, Jay. I don't know if it's our connection or not, but I hear you loud and clear. So
okay. One of the hunt strategies I like is to, if we find a deer that we want to shoot, what I like to do is I typically am always hunting with someone else, and I like to have someone keep their eye on that buck. So watch the buck bed down, and I am different than some people. I like to bed the deer down, then leave someone watching the deer. Hopefully they can see the deer, or at least the bush that the deer went behind. And here's the trick. You have to trust whoever you're hunting with that they are not going to take their eye off of that deer until you get in position to shoot. And sometimes that's the hard part, and I think that's where having reliable hunting partners comes in, is that you know that there's nothing that's going to make whoever's watching your deer stop looking at the deer. If they have to use the restroom, I have done some crazy things while watching deer for Dar and my cousin and some other people where you got to take a leak. You got to keep watching through your binos and your tripod, so you just got to do your thing right there. And if you can keep your eye on that deer, your percentage of efficiency and effectiveness goes up tenfold. Oh, yeah. And once the shooter then gets into position, then the shooter says, okay, I'm on the deer. Do you need to take a break? Then the spotter can take a break, get a drink, whatever, and then get back on the deer. But if you can have the discipline and have good hunting partners, that's a very efficient way to harvest deer.
That's very true. Jay, in those scenarios, I always tend to bed the buck down. I think that is the most important thing. Don't let him stay up feeding before you make your stock. Put him to bed, get your game plan going down, and just have time in your favor. There's only a couple of buddies I know that I trust in those scenarios. And so, yes, I do think that is very important. It's so important that you do keep an eye on them, because they can slip away, they can vanish, they take 2 or 3 steps in one direction and you don't see them again. So yes, keeping quality optics on that deer is very, very important, and it's key, actually. So
let's talk about quality optics, Elliot. Actually, let's take a quick break here to hear from our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
Okay, Jay.
Guys, it's the month of October, and as you know, the month of October is the Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And DeadeyeOutfitters.com is doing their annual Breast Cancer Awareness t-shirt design again. They're donating 10% of all the proceeds to breast cancer research. The men's and women's t-shirts are currently available on their website at DeadeyeOutfitters.com. Be sure to use the promo code JScott to save 10% on all purchases. Pick up some Deadeye Outfitters and wear your obsession.
So, Elliot, let's talk about quality optics. I've been using Swarovski for a long, long time. I can remember when Dar and I both bought our first pair of 10x42 Swarovski SLCs, and it was like, we were like 2 kids in a candy store, and we could not wait to get out there and spot deer and use those 10x42s to glass for Coues deer. And we were young bucks at the time and could really hike well, and we didn't have the great optics, and so I think we used more of our legs to jump deer, and it just wasn't as an efficient way. I am still a Swarovski guy. I have 1250s. I've had every generation of 15x56 that Swarovski has made. But I think every bit as important as your optics, I think the tripod is every bit as important, and I think a quality tripod head. Some people have great tripods, but they have a squeaky tripod head or something that isn't smooth. And in my opinion, a smooth panning tripod head is very important, because for Coues deer especially, if you've got a jerky tripod head, you're going to miss those deer that are bedded, or you're going to miss that black nose or that little white tail in the bush, or just the flicker of an ear. And so I think a smooth panning tripod head is of utmost importance.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, especially when you have your spotting scope on your tripod, because it's very, very sensitive. You bump it and it moves 3 feet, because it's so zoomed in. I love the Outdoorsman adapter, and I'm with you there on Swarovski. I hate to defame any other optics, because they do make some great products. The 1250 Swarovskis, in my opinion, are a great glass. It's about the perfect combination of wide field of view and distance. I can't tell you how many bucks I've glassed with the SLC Swarovskis. I think it's a very, very good investment for anyone getting serious about glassing Coues deer.
Yeah, for sure. In my mind, the wow factor and I'm going to be honest, most of the European optics companies make good quality optics. One of the things that always sold me on Swarovskis was very early on that same pair of 10x42 binoculars that Dar and I bought. he actually was glassing around the Black River and knocked his tripod over, and they fell, just clanked all the way, a couple 100 feet off a cliff, and every piece of glass in the optic was broken. And he sent them back through the Outdoorsman's. He bought them at the Outdoorsman's, sent them back to Swarovski, and they fixed and sent them a laundry list, literally, of what they fixed. And when they came back, they looked brand new. And for me, why I'm such a Swarovski believer is their customer service and their willingness to take Hunter's mistakes. I mean, he dropped them off a cliff. It wasn't like, he did it. And they fixed them. And, their warranty program is unbelievable. I will agree with you on the 1250, those 1250 ELs. They're phenomenal binocular. The field of view is great. I have the new 15s as well, and I love them. If I had to choose one for Coues deer, I'm probably going to go with the 15s just because of the 3 extra power. But I used the 1250s for almost a full year for Coues deer and sheep, and I loved the 1250s. The nice thing about the 1250s is you can handhold them, whereas I have more of a hard time holding the 15s. My hands shake a little bit, and so the 1250s are, I believe both of those binoculars, you cannot go wrong. Yes. I'm also a believer in the Kowa 32 power Highlanders. But those are not for every application.
Sure.
They're heavy, 14 pounds plus a 14-pound tripod. Those you can't take everywhere. Some people do. I don't. I take them to choice places that I have picked out. But I think in speaking about gear with tripods and good quality optics, I think it's just important to sit and glass and slow down and take your time. I know that when I'm not seeing deer and I'm getting frustrated, I tell myself, slow down. And half the time, within 2 minutes of slowing down, boom, I pick up a deer. And the optics are so good in my mind that you do so much quick scanning because they're such quality optics that you kind of get in a routine of going too fast. Right. And a lot of times I have to slow myself down.
Yes, absolutely. Going to those Coues you were talking about, Jay, I don't know if you look at my profile picture on my personal Instagram page, you see me looking through a pair of those. And they are a very, very impressive piece of glass. One of my hunting partners owns a pair, and they are just absolutely amazing when you're looking at really vast country. We had a muzzleloader antelope hunt in 19A 2 years ago, and they were a game changer, man. Just for covering so much country, I've never glassed through anything quite like it. And I know you guys. I've seen you guys use those in vast sheep country. So yeah, I do really think highly of that piece of glass.
Yeah, and Coues deer are small enough that if you've got the 32 power and you can be looking at a greater distance, I just think your chances of finding deer go up. They're not for every application, but certainly if you have a good vantage point, we use them a lot in Mexico where there's a lot of roads on these ranches where we can drive and then hike up, say, 150, 200 yards and have a big vantage, and they're great for that. I want to talk a little bit about on these early season Coues hunts. One thing I will add with gear is trekking poles, good hiking boots that are comfortable that you already have worn in. And I've been using here lately the new Spot Generation 3 Spot that's made by Global Star, and I used it on this last sheep hunt where I could send my wife a text, click the OK button, and that basically gave her a GPS reading of my exact coordinate on a Google map. So she saw exactly where I was, and it said, you can customize, what you want to what you want to send, and it's basically everything's great, having a great day, love you.
Yeah.
And I think, it's a relatively cheap thing to have to give your loved ones at home a good sense that everything's going great on your hunt. And quite honestly, there's an SOS button that if you were in some serious emergency situation, you could hit that and you could be rescued. So those are some gear tips, gear things that I think are important for Coues. Is there anything that you feel I left out there?
Jay, going back to those trekking sticks, I just invested in a pair, and I think that they're absolutely handy when it comes to downhill.
Yes.
Everyone thinks
Yes.
uphill is the strenuous part. My struggle is downhill.
Because the rocks are somewhat loose, and
Yes.
I'm the same way. My feet like to skip right out from under me, and I started using trekking pole years ago, and at the little bit of ridicule from Dar, and it wasn't more than a couple months later on the next hunts, he had a pair, and I would urge people that don't use them to use them. You can be a lot more stable, especially at night in the dark, especially going downhill. It sure helps when you're packing an animal out, and it really saves your knees. When I was young in my 20s, I didn't think much about it. I could go uphill, downhill, same speed. It didn't matter.
Yes.
The older I get, the wear and tear on your body, trekking poles are huge, for sure. Elliot, it's been a great talk. We could talk for hours on Coues deer. I wanted to give you a chance to give a few tips, if you have any additional tips for those hunters about to hit the woods on these early season Coues hunts.
I think we kind of covered it, Jay. My advice is stay patient, stay persistent. That hot weather creeps up on you in the middle of the day, but like we talked about, that is the most important time. Cover some country, get some good optics on those hills, look for them in their beds, wait for them to stand up. Just stay with it, And I want to wish everyone a good luck on this first general hunt coming up. I run the Hunt AZ page, as Jay stated, and it's a great pleasure to see so many successful hunts with new timers and experienced hunters. I've made some great relationships with so many people, some guides. It's just been a great thing. The community has really gotten strong, and I'm very grateful for it. And I hope to get bigger. And I just want to wish everyone a very, very safe and successful season this year.
Absolutely, Elliot. And I might add that if you haven't gone on the Hunt AZ, that's Hunt_AZ Instagram page, you need to also tag your photos on these upcoming Coues deer hunts. I've been appreciating people hashtagging JScott Outdoors, but one of my favorite hashtags is Hunt_AZ, or hashtag Hunt_AZ, and check out Elliot's page and use his hashtag so we can see all these Arizona bucks on these early season hunts. And Elliot, I also understand you run a freight with your dad, a flatbed trucking freight business in Tucson. Tell me a little bit about that. If any of our listeners out there need anything hauled around, tell me how they can find you and the name of the company and such.
Yes, Jay. We have my dad and my uncle run a freight business. We have 5 flatbed trucks. We haul general freight. Excuse me. Wherever you need something hauled, we can be there. We have.
How do they reach you, Elliot?
We do not have website at this point. That is in the works, but we have a local phone number. We can. I don't know, Jay, if you want to.
Yeah,
list that. It's 520-241-7578. We haul in the western states of The United States. We try to stay west, but we can go anywhere. We're licensed in all 50 states. You need some freight hauled, some equipment, a vehicle, whatever your needs are. Give us a call.
What's the name of the company?
Company is Pistolero LLC.
And it's based out of Tucson?
Yes, we're out of Tucson, Jay.
That's awesome. Well, that's great. I want to make a note of that for sure, because it always seems like in my real estate business and the outfitting business, I'm always running into somebody that needs something hauled somewhere. So I'll make a note of that, Elliot. And I want to thank you for being on, and I want to wish you the best. I know we could talk for hours on Coues there, and we'll probably have to do it again.
Absolutely, Jay.
Want to wish you the best this weekend on your hunts, and thanks for doing a great job on the Hunt AZ Instagram page, and I'll be chatting at you down the road. And until then, God bless you. Okay, buddy?
God bless you, Jay. I was happy to be on the show. I really appreciate it, and we will be in touch, buddy.
And I have to say that I hope the Devils win and the Cats lose this weekend, but that's just par for the course. So, all right, buddy.
All right, Jay. Take care, sir.
All right, buddy.